The judge slid the document closer to me and said, "Ms. Mendez, you can sign here." Why was my own mother nodding like this was normal? Why was my brother standing behind the lawyer instead of beside me? And why did this family agreement erase my name from everything my stepfather built? "This is just to simplify things," Daniel said, calm, practiced. "You'll still be taken care of." The paper in front of me said something very different. My hands didn't move. Instead, I looked up at the judge and asked one quiet question. And that was the moment the room shifted. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from and what time it is there. And if you've ever been told something was for the family when it cost you everything, I think you'll understand why I didn't sign. 3 weeks before that courtroom, we were all standing in my mother's living room in Columbus, pretending grief made us closer than we actually were. Carlos had been gone for 4 days. The house still smelled like the lilies people kept sending, and every flat surface held a sympathy card with the same careful handwriting. My mother, Elena, moved from room to room like she had a script to follow. Coffee, quiet, smile, soft, thank you, repeat. Daniel stood near the fireplace, shaking hands, receiving condolences like he'd stepped into a role he'd been preparing for. I stayed near the kitchen doorway watching. That's what I do. I watch before I move. I'd flown in from Chicago the morning after the hospital called. I hadn't slept much since. Not because of grief exactly, Carlos and I had a complicated relationship, but because something felt off. Not loud, not obvious, just slightly misaligned like a picture frame tilted a few degrees. It didn't make sense yet, but it stayed with me. That afternoon, after most of the relatives left, the tone shifted. No one announced it. It just happened. Daniel poured himself a drink and sat at the dining table like he belonged there in a different way now. My mom sat across from him, quieter than before, but more focused. There was a folder on the table I hadn't noticed earlier. I walked in slowly. "What's that?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He glanced at Mom first. "It's just paperwork," she said. "Things your stepfather had in order." "Already?" I asked. "It's been 4 days." "It's responsible," Daniel said, finally looking at me. "Not everything has to wait." That was the first moment something clicked into place just a little. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "What kind of paperwork?" Daniel slid the folder a few inches toward himself. "Not me. Estate structure, asset management, nothing complicated." "Then why does it look like I'm not supposed to see it?" He smiled. "Not unkind. Just controlled. You are seeing it. We're talking about it." That wasn't the same thing. Mom leaned forward. "Amara, honey, your stepfather wanted everything handled smoothly. No confusion, no disputes." "I'm not confused," I said. "I'm asking what's in the folder." There was a pause. Long enough to matter. Then Daniel opened it. He didn't hand it to me. He turned it slightly so I could read from where I stood. That told me everything I needed to know about how this conversation was supposed to go. I stepped closer anyway. At the top in clean legal font, I read Family Settlement Framework. My name was there, but not where I expected. I scanned quickly. Beneficiaries listed, assets summarized, a trust structure proposed. Then I saw it. Under my name instead of beneficiary, it said voluntary releaser. I blinked. "What is that?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "It just means you're opting out of direct management. It simplifies things." "That's not what it says." "It's legal language." "I work in finance," I said. "I know the difference between simplifying and removing." Mom's voice softened. "No one is removing you." "Then why am I the only one labeled like this?" Neither of them answered immediately. Daniel picked up his glass, took a slow sip. "Buying time." Because he said, "Finally, you don't live here. You have your own life, your own career. This would just complicate things for you." There it was. Not an explanation, a positioning. "I'm still family," I said. "Of course you are," Mom replied quickly. "Too quickly. That's exactly why we want this to be easy." "Easy for who?" Another pause. Daniel closed the folder halfway as if the conversation itself had a lid he could put back on. "We're just trying to be practical," he said. "Carlos trusted me to handle things. I didn't argue that point. Not yet." Instead, I asked, "When did he say that?" Daniel's eyes flickered for just a second. "Over time. That's not a date. It doesn't have to be. It does, I thought. It always does." I nodded slowly like I was letting it go. "I'd like a copy," I said. Mom hesitated. "Why?" "So I can read it properly." Daniel slid a single page out and handed it to me. "Not the whole thing. Just a summary." "That should be enough for now," he said. "For now." I took it anyway. "Who's the lawyer?" I asked. "Richard Cole," Daniel said. "He's been advising us." "Us," I repeated. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. "Amara, we're on the same side." I looked at her fingers, then back at the page in my hand. "I'm not sure we are," I said quietly. That night, I didn't confront anyone else. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I went to the guest room, closed the door, and laid the document flat on the bed. Then I started reading it line by line, not as a daughter, as an analyst. Every phrase mattered. Every omission mattered more. And the more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't something put together in the last 4 days. At the bottom of the page in small print was a revision note. Draft V3 prepared 2 months prior. I stared at that line for a long time. Carlos had been in and out of treatment back then. Some days he didn't remember where he was. And somehow during that time, a document was drafted that quietly rewrote everything. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my brother. I opened my messages and typed one name, Sophia. Then I took a photo of the page and sent it. "Tell me what this really means," I wrote. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. And as I waited, I realized something I couldn't unsee anymore. This wasn't a conversation I'd been invited into. It was a decision that had already been made, and I had just been handed the version where I agreed to it. Sophia called me before I even set my phone down. "Amara," she said, skipping hello, "don't sign anything, not even a draft." I wasn't planning to, I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But tell me why." There was a pause on her end, the kind that meant she was choosing her words carefully. "Because that line you sent me," she said. "Voluntary releaser. That's not casual language, that's you formally giving up rights you may not fully understand yet." I figured as much. "No," she said, firmer now. "You're underestimating it. That wording can lock you out of future claims, not just control benefits distributions, even the right to question decisions." I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. "So I disappear. Legally pretty close." That sat between us for a moment. "I need the full document," she continued. "Not a summary. Everything. Attachments, revisions, all of it." "They didn't give me that," I said. "Of course they didn't." Her tone wasn't judgmental, just certain. I exhaled slowly. "Okay, let's assume I get it. What am I looking for?" "Start simple," she said. "Who controls the trust? What powers they have? What oversight exists? And most importantly, when this was drafted." I turned my head toward the paper still lying on the bed. "I already have that part," I said. 2 months ago." Silence. "Then, that's not good." "I know. Was your stepfather lucid back then?" "Some days," I said. "Other days, not really." "Amara," she said quietly, "if this was drafted during a period where his capacity was compromised, that changes everything." "I don't know if he signed anything then." "But someone was preparing for it," she replied. That landed harder than I expected, because it meant this wasn't reactive. It wasn't grief-driven. It was planned. "I'll get the full file," I said. "Good. And when you do, don't skim it. Read it like you read a financial model. Every assumption, every dependency." "I will." "And Amara, yeah, don't confront them yet." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "You think I want to?" "I think you want answers," she said. "But right now, they have more information than you. That's not a fight you start emotionally." She was right. She's usually right. "Okay," I said. "I'll wait. Call me when you have the documents." We hung up, and for a moment the room felt too quiet. Downstairs, I could hear my mom's voice, soft and steady, talking to someone on the phone. Daniel's footsteps moved across the floor, measured, unhurried. Everything sounded normal. That was the problem. The next morning, I found Daniel in the kitchen before anyone else was awake. He was already dressed, coffee in hand, scrolling through something on his phone. "Morning," I said. He looked up surprised but composed. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. He nodded like that made sense. I walked over to the counter, poured myself coffee, and leaned against it. I was thinking about the paperwork, I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I'd like to review the full version." Daniel didn't react immediately. He took a sip first. "It's a lot of legal language," he said. "The summary covers what matters." "I'd still like to see it." He set his cup down. "Why?" "Because my name is on it." "That doesn't mean you need to get into the details." I looked at him then. Really looked. "You've already gotten into the details," I said. A small shift in his expression. Not defensive, not aggressive, just tighter. "I'm trying to make this easier for everyone," he said. "I'm sure you are. And digging into every clause is exactly what I do for a living. I cut and still calm. You know that." He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded once. "I'll email it to you," he said. "Thank you." But he didn't send it right away. I waited most of the day. Nothing. Late afternoon, I texted him. "Did you send the document?" A few minutes later, "Not yet. I'll do it tonight." He didn't. The next morning, still nothing. That's when I stopped asking. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for Richard Cole. It didn't take long to find his firm. Mid-sized. Estate planning, trust administration, probate litigation. Clean website. Professional. Careful language. There was a general contact email. I stared at it for a moment, then started typing. "My name is Amara Mendez. I believe you've been advising my family regarding the estate of Carlos Mendez. I've been provided a partial document referencing a family settlement agreement. I would like to request a full copy of any documents where I am named." I paused, then added one more line. "For my independent review." I read it twice, made sure it sounded neutral, not confrontational. Then I hit send. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell Daniel. An hour later, my phone buzzed. An email from Richard Cole. "Ms. Mendez, thank you for reaching out. I will need confirmation from the primary client before releasing full documentation. However, I can provide a version of the agreement for your review. Please see attached." Attached. He hadn't asked which version. He hadn't delayed. He hadn't ignored me, which meant something else entirely. I wasn't the one he considered the client. I opened the file. It was longer than I expected. Dozens of pages, clauses, subclauses, appendices. I didn't rush. I read, page by page, line by line, and about halfway through I found the section Sophia had warned me about. Trustee authority. It was worse than I thought. Daniel wouldn't just manage the assets. He could decide distributions, delay them, deny them, reinvest without consultation. There was no requirement for annual reporting to beneficiaries, no independent oversight, no automatic review, just discretion. I kept reading. Then I found the date. Initial draft 2 months prior. Revisions followed. Each one tightening control, narrowing rights, clarifying authority. Not a rushed document, a refined one. I scrolled further. At the bottom of one appendix, there was a note. Draft prepared following consultation with family representative. No name, just that phrase. Family representative. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse slower now, not faster. Because this wasn't confusion anymore. It was structure, intentional, methodical, quiet. And then near the end, I saw something I hadn't expected. A reference to a signing appointment. Scheduled. Documented. With a date. I checked it against what I remembered. That was the week Carlos had trouble recognizing me. The week he asked the nurse where he was twice in the same conversation. I stared at the screen. Then I reached for my phone again. This time I didn't text Sophia. I opened a new note, and I wrote down one question. Just one. Because suddenly I understood what Natalie Carter, who I hadn't even met yet, would later confirm. I didn't need to argue everything. I didn't need to prove everything. I just needed to ask the right thing. and let them answer it. I didn't go back downstairs that night. Instead, I sat at the small desk in the guest room with my laptop open, rereading the document until the language stopped feeling abstract and started feeling deliberate. There's a difference. At first, legal documents look complicated because of the wording, but once you slow down, patterns emerge. Repetition isn't accidental. Neither is omission. Daniel's name appeared again and again. Authority, discretion, final decision. My name appeared in fewer places, mostly in sections that described what I was giving up, not what I was receiving. That wasn't simplification, that was design. The next morning, I drove back to Chicago. I told my mom I had work. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed relieved. "Take your time," she said, hugging me a little too quickly. "We'll figure everything out when you're ready." We already have, I thought. Just not in the same way. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had a plan, not a full one, but enough to move forward without reacting emotionally. I needed clarity on two things: what the law actually allowed, and whether what Daniel had done crossed a line. That afternoon, I walked into the compliance office at work and found Ethan Brooks at his desk. He looked up surprised. "You don't usually visit this side of the building." "I don't usually need to," I said. "Got a minute?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sure." I sat down, keeping my tone casual. "Hypothetical question." He smiled. "Those are never hypothetical. Let's say someone creates a trust where one person has full discretionary control. No reporting requirements, no oversight. Is that normal?" Ethan leaned back thinking. "It's not unusual," he said. "Especially in family trusts. People assume trust equals trust, even without accountability." Sometimes he shrugged. "It depends on how much the grantor trusted the trustee." I nodded slowly. "Okay. What about this? What if the person creating the trust wasn't fully clear-minded at the time?" That got his attention. He straightened slightly. "You mean capacity issues?" "Yeah. Then it's a different conversation," he said. "If someone signs legal documents while cognitively impaired, that can be challenged." "Challenged how?" "Undue influence, lack of capacity, coercion, even depending on the situation." I folded my hands in my lap. What counts as undue influence? Ethan paused, choosing his words. "It's not just pressure," he said. "It's when someone takes advantage of another person's weakened state to push decisions that benefit them." I didn't respond right away. He watched me for a second, then added more carefully, "Why are you asking?" "I'm trying to understand something I said." "Does it involve you?" I met his eyes. "It might." He nodded once. "Then document everything." "I already am." "Good. Dates matter. Who was present? What condition the person was in? Any inconsistencies?" "I have some of that." "Get more," he said. "Because if this ever goes to court, it won't be about what feels wrong. It'll be about what you can show." That was exactly what I needed to hear. Not validation. Framework. "Thanks," I said, standing. "Amara," he said, as I turned to leave. I paused. "If something feels off," he said, "it usually is. Just make sure you don't act on instinct alone." "I won't." Back at my desk, I opened the document again. This time I wasn't reading it as a daughter or even as someone potentially affected. I was mapping it. Timeline on one side, document revisions on the other. Dates changes, language shifts. The initial draft 2 months before Carlos passed. Revision 1 6 weeks before. Revision 2 3 weeks before. Each version gave Daniel more control. Each version reduced checks. Each version made my role smaller. That wasn't grief reacting. That was someone refining a plan. I stared at the date of the scheduled signing again. It lined up with a memory I couldn't ignore. Carlos sitting in his hospital bed looking at me like he was trying to place who I was. Amara, he'd said, uncertain, "You made it." Like I had traveled far even though I'd just walked down the hallway. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened a new tab. If capacity mattered, I needed records. Not guesses, not impressions. Documentation. I searched for the hospital's records department and found the request form. It wasn't simple. proof of relationship, identification, reason for request. I filled everything out carefully, not emotionally, precisely. Under reason, I wrote personal estate review. Not confrontation, not accusation, just review. I attached what they required and submitted it. Then I waited. 2 days later, I got a response. Request received. Processing may take up to 10 business days. Too long, but still something. That evening, Sophia called. Did you get the full document, she asked. I did. And it's worse than the summary. That doesn't surprise me. I mapped the revisions, I said. It wasn't rushed. It evolved. That means intent, she said. Yeah. Do you have anything on capacity yet? Not yet. I requested hospital records. Good. There was a pause. Amara, she said more gently now. What are you thinking of doing? I looked at the screen in front of me at Daniel's name repeated in clauses that gave him control over everything. I'm not confronting them, I said. Okay. I'm not arguing with them either. That's smart. I'm going to let them walk me into the room where they think I'll agree. Sophia didn't respond right away. Then and then I'm going to ask one question they're not ready for. She exhaled slowly. You sound very calm. I am. That's when you're the most dangerous, she said, half joking. I smiled faintly. I'm not trying to be dangerous. What are you trying to be? I thought about that for a second. Clear, I said. After we hung up, I sat there for a while listening to the quiet of my apartment. No voices, no pressure, just space to think. And in that space, the situation became simpler than it had felt before. They wanted me to sign something I didn't fully understand. They expected me to trust them. They assumed I wouldn't look too closely. But I had, and now I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for a moment, a specific one, where a single question could shift everything. I just needed one more piece to make that question land. And I had a feeling it was sitting in a hospital file with Carlos's name on it. The hospital didn't call me. They sent a secure email. I opened it during my lunch break, sitting at my desk with a sandwich I didn't touch. Your request has been approved. Records are available through the portal. No explanation, no emotion, just access. I logged in immediately. There were dozens of files. Admission notes, daily evaluations, medication logs, cognitive assessments. I didn't skim. I read. The first few pages were routine, dates, vital signs, observations that felt clinical and distant. Then I reached the neurological evaluations. That's where everything slowed down. Patient exhibits intermittent confusion, difficulty recalling recent events, disoriented to time on multiple occasions. I leaned closer to the screen. These weren't vague impressions. They were documented patterns. I scrolled further. There was a specific section labeled Capacity Assessment. I stopped breathing for a second before opening it. Patient demonstrates impaired executive function, limited ability to understand complex financial decisions. Recommendation: defer major legal or financial actions until cognitive stability improves. I sat back, not because I was surprised, because it was now written in a way that couldn't be dismissed. This wasn't my memory. This wasn't my interpretation. This was a medical record. Dated, signed, filed. I kept going. A few pages later, I found the timeline of visitors. Names, dates, duration. Daniel's name appeared repeatedly. More than mine. More than anyone else's. That alone didn't prove anything. But then I saw it. One entry highlighted in a way that made it stand out even without formatting. Family member present during legal document discussion. No name listed. Just that phrase. I checked the date. It matched the scheduled signing appointment from the trust document. I stared at it, my pulse steady, not racing. Because this was the piece I had been waiting for. Not proof of wrongdoing, but proof of context. Carlos wasn't just unwell. He was documented as not fully capable of making complex decisions. And on the same day, someone had discussed legal documents with him. I closed the file and sat still for a moment. Then I reopened it. This time I took screenshots, saved copies, backed them up. Not because I was paranoid, because I understood how easily things could disappear when they became inconvenient. That evening I called Sophia. I have it, I said. Tell me. Capacity assessment. Impairment documented. Recommendation against major financial decisions. She didn't interrupt. And there's a note, I continued. Legal document discussion on the same day as the signing appointment. A pause. Then, that's significant. It's not direct proof of influence, I said. No, she agreed. But it creates a timeline. And timelines are powerful. I also have visitor logs, I added. Daniel was there more than anyone. That strengthens it. I leaned back in my chair. It shows opportunity. And context, she said. Which is what courts look for when direct evidence isn't available. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm not going to accuse him, I said. Good. I'm not even going to bring this up first. Also good. I'm going to let them present everything like it's clean and simple. And then I'm going to ask one question that forces them to explain this. Sophia was quiet for a second. Do you know what that question is yet? I'm close. Make sure it's precise, she said. Not emotional, not broad. Something they can't answer without exposing the inconsistency. I know. We hung up, and I sat there looking at the files on my screen. For the first time since Carlos died, I didn't feel like I was reacting. I felt ahead, not in control of everything, but no longer behind. 2 days later, I drove back to Ohio. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. When I walked into the house, Mom was in the kitchen. She looked up surprised. Amara, I thought you were staying in Chicago this week. I needed to grab a few things, I said. That wasn't a lie, just not the full truth. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Daniel's upstairs. He's been going over some final details. Of course he had. I set my bag down and walked up the stairs. His door was open. He was at the desk, papers spread out, laptop open. He looked up when he heard me. Didn't expect you back yet, he said. I had some time. He nodded. Good. We're almost ready to finalize everything. Finalize what? He gestured to the papers. The agreement. We'll probably have you sign early next week. I stepped into the room. Calm, neutral. I've been reviewing it, I said. Yeah. He watched me carefully now, and he asked. It's thorough, I said. That's the idea. I nodded once. Then I added, I have a question about the signing. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. What about it? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I wanted to see how he held the silence. He didn't fill it. He waited. Controlled, just like always. So I smiled slightly and said, Nothing yet. I just want to understand the process. He relaxed just a little. We'll walk you through everything, he said. You won't be signing anything you don't understand. I held his gaze. That's exactly what I'm making sure of, I replied. That night, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't reread the files. I didn't second-guess anything, because the question was already forming in my mind. It wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. It just needed to connect two things they were hoping no one would ever put together. The signing, and the condition Carlos was in when it happened. And once that connection was made out loud in the right room, they wouldn't be able to keep it separate anymore. Dinner that night felt like a performance everyone had agreed to without saying it out loud. The same table, the same chairs, the same rhythm of passing plates and asking polite questions that didn't actually ask anything. But now I could see the structure behind it. Daniel sat at the head of the table. Not officially, but consistently. My mother, Elena, watched him more than she spoke, like she was waiting for cues she didn't want to admit she needed. I took my usual seat across from them. Chicago treating you well? Daniel asked, cutting into his food. It always does, I said. Mom smiled. You work too much. I work enough. A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just careful. Then Daniel said casually, we should probably set a date for the signing. There it was. Not a question. A step already in motion. I was thinking about that, I replied. Mom leaned forward slightly. Good. We don't want to drag this out. It's better for everyone if things are settled cleanly. Cleanly, I repeated. Daniel nodded. No confusion. No disputes later. I let my fork rest on the plate. I do have a question, I said. Both of them looked at me. Daniel gestured lightly. Go ahead. About the timeline, I said. When everything was prepared. It's all in the documents, he replied. Smooth. Ready. I saw that, I said. I just want to hear it from you. He leaned back in his chair, considering. We started organizing things a couple of months ago, he said. Nothing unusual, just planning ahead. Before Carlos passed. Yes, while he was still in treatment. A flicker. Small, but there. He wanted to make sure things were handled, Daniel said. He was very clear about that. Was he? Mom stepped in quickly. Amara, your stepfather trusted Daniel. That's what matters. I'm not questioning trust, I said. I'm asking about timing. Daniel set his fork down. Timing doesn't change the outcome, he said. The structure is what matters. It might be, I said quietly. Another pause. This one heavier. Mom reached for her glass but didn't drink. Why are you focusing on this, she asked. Because details matter, I said. Especially when they affect legal decisions. Daniel gave a short exhale, almost a laugh. You're overanalyzing it. That's my job. This isn't your job, he said. It's family. There it was again. That word, family, used like a boundary. Or a warning. I met his eyes. Exactly. Something in his expression tightened again. Not anger. Control adjusting. We're not trying to exclude you, he said, more measured now. We're trying to make sure everything runs smoothly. By centralizing control, I said. That's how trusts work. Some of them. He didn't respond. Mom leaned forward, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Amara, honey, you've always been independent. You've built your own life. This just keeps things simple here. Simple for who I asked. For the family, she said. I nodded slowly. I am the family. That landed differently. Not loud. Not dramatic. But it shifted something in the room. Daniel picked up his glass, then set it back down without drinking. No one is saying you're not, he said. Then why am I the only one being asked to give something up? Silence. Not the careful kind. The real kind. Mom looked down at her plate. Daniel didn't. We're not asking you to give anything up, he said. We're asking you to trust the structure. The structure removes my rights. It simplifies them. It removes them, I repeated. He held my gaze. Then for the first time, his tone changed. Just slightly. You don't need this the way we do, he said. The words hung there, clearer than anything else he'd said. Mom closed her eyes briefly like she wished she could take it back. But it was already out. What does that mean, I asked. It means, he said, choosing his words more carefully now. You're already successful. You're stable. You don't rely on this. And you do. This isn't about reliance, he said quickly. It's about continuity, responsibility, control, I said. He didn't correct me. That was the answer. Mom finally spoke again, her voice low. We thought you'd understand, she said. You've always been strong. You don't need help the way Daniel does. There it was. Not just strategy, belief. They hadn't just decided to structure the trust this way. They had justified it. To themselves. To each other. Maybe even to Carlos. I see, I said. And I did. Not everything. But enough. I picked up my fork again even though I wasn't hungry. No one spoke for a while. The conversation drifted after that to safe topics, neutral ground. Work, weather, a neighbor's renovation. But it didn't matter. The real conversation had already happened. Later that night, I stood in the hallway outside Daniel's office. The door was slightly open. He was on the phone. I've got it under control, he was saying. She's asking questions, but it's nothing we can't handle. A pause. No, she hasn't signed yet. Another pause. I know. I'll make sure it's done before the hearing. I stepped back before he could see me. Not because I was afraid. Because I had heard enough. This wasn't just pressure. It was expectation. A deadline. A plan with a finish line that didn't include my consent, just my signature. I went back to the guest room and closed the door. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle. I wasn't angry, not the way people expect. I was clear about what they believed, clear about what they were trying to do, and clear about what I needed to do next. I didn't need to argue with them. I didn't need to convince them. I just needed to bring the right question into the right room and let it do what arguments couldn't. I picked up my phone and opened my notes. The question was almost complete now. Not emotional, not accusatory, just precise. Tied to a date, a condition, a decision. All I needed was one more layer to make sure it couldn't be brushed aside, and I knew exactly where to get it. I met Natalie Carter on a Tuesday morning in an office that felt deliberately neutral. No heavy wood desks, no intimidating walls of law books, just clean lines, soft lighting, and a woman who looked at me like she wasn't here to impress me. She was here to understand me. Start from the beginning, she said, once we sat down. So I did. Not everything. Not emotionally. Just the facts. Carlos's illness, the timing of the documents, the structure of the trust, the role assigned to me, the hospital records, the visitor logs. Natalie didn't interrupt. She took notes, occasionally asked for clarification, dates, names, exact wording. By the time I finished, the room felt quieter than when we started. She closed her notebook slowly. Okay, she said. You've done something most people don't. What's that? You didn't react. You documented. I didn't respond to that. I just waited. She leaned back slightly, studying me. You're not here to fight for everything, she said. You're here because something doesn't make sense. Yes. And you want to understand whether it crosses a legal line. Yes. She nodded once. It might. That wasn't dramatic. It wasn't definitive. But it was enough. Walk me through it, I said. She tapped her pen lightly against the notebook. There are two separate issues here, she said. First, the structure of the trust itself. That part, while aggressive, isn't necessarily illegal. People can give one person broad control if they choose to, I figured. The second issue, she continued, is how that structure came into existence. That's where things get more complicated. I leaned forward slightly. Capacity, she said. And influence. I have medical records, I said. Documented cognitive impairment. Recommendation against major decisions. Good, she said. That establishes a baseline. And I have a note about a legal document discussion on the same day as the scheduled signing. That's important, she said. Not proof on its own. But it creates a connection. I nodded. What I don't have, I added, is direct evidence of what was said, or how the decision was made. You don't need a recording, Natalie said. Courts don't expect perfect evidence. They look for patterns, timing, opportunity, consistency. That's what I thought. She flipped to a new page in her notebook. So here's the question, she said. What do you want to happen? I considered that. Not what I should say. What was actually true? I don't want to sign something that removes my rights, I said. Fair. I don't need control over everything. But I won't agree to be excluded. She nodded. So your goal isn't to dismantle the entire structure? No. It's to stop it from being finalized under questionable circumstances. Yes. She closed her notebook again. Then you don't need a full legal battle, she said. Not yet. What do I need? She held my gaze. You need to slow the process down. How? By introducing doubt, she said. Not emotional doubt. Legal doubt. I felt something settle into place. That's what I've been building, I said. I can see that. She leaned forward slightly now, her tone more precise. If you walk into that courtroom and start making accusations, you'll lose control of the narrative. I won't do that. I know, she said. You'll do something more effective. I didn't answer, she continued. You'll ask a question that forces them to explain a contradiction. Yes. And that question needs to be specific enough that they can't generalize their way out of it. I think I have it. Let's hear it. I took a breath not because I was nervous, but because I wanted the wording exact. Who scheduled the signing appointment, I said, and under what medical clearance it was considered appropriate at that time. Natalie didn't respond immediately. She looked at me for a second, then nodded slowly. That's good. Is it enough? It does two things, she said. First, it ties the legal action to the medical condition. Second, it shifts the burden of explanation to them. That's what I want. And if they can't answer clearly, she added, the judge has a reason to pause the process, which gives us time. Exactly. I sat back in my chair. For the first time, it felt like the plan wasn't just instinct. It was structured. Do I need to present the medical records right away? I asked. No, she said. Not unless you're asked. Let the question open the door, then provide what's necessary. Controlled disclosure, she smiled slightly. You really are a financial analyst. I returned a faint smile. Is there anything I'm missing? I asked. She thought for a moment. Yes. What? Your family doesn't think you're going to do this. I know. They think you'll either sign or argue emotionally. I won't do either. Good, she said. Because the element of surprise matters here. I nodded. Amara, she added, her tone softer now. Once you do this, things won't go back to how they were. I don't think they ever will, I said. She didn't disagree. We stood up and she walked me to the door. Call me after the hearing, she said. I will. As I stepped outside, the air felt colder than I expected. Or maybe I just felt more aware of it. Because everything was clearer now. Not easier, just clearer. I got into my car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. I wasn't thinking about the argument or the confrontation. I was thinking about the moment, the exact second when the room would shift. Not because I raised my voice, not because I exposed everything, but because I asked one question they hadn't prepared for. And once that question was out there, they wouldn't be able to put everything back into neat separate boxes anymore. The signing, the timing, the condition, all of it would exist in the same space. And in that space, control would start to slip. I started the car. The hearing was in 3 days. And for the first time, I wasn't wondering what they would do. I was wondering how they would answer. The hallway outside the courtroom was quieter than I expected. Not silent, just contained. Like everyone there was holding something in, waiting for it to matter. Daniel was already there when I arrived, standing near the wall with Richard Cole. My mother sat on a bench a few feet away, her hands folded tightly in her lap. They all looked up at the same time. For a second, no one moved. Then Mom stood. Amara, she said, her voice soft but strained. You're early. So are you, I replied. Daniel stepped forward, composed as ever. We were just going over a few final details. Of course you were. Richard Cole gave me a polite nod. Miss Mendez, good to see you. You too, I said. Matching his tone, there was a brief pause. One of those moments where everyone knows something is about to be said, but no one wants to be the first to say it. Daniel broke it. Before we go in, he said, we should take a minute. Make sure we're all aligned. Aligned. That word again. I didn't respond right away. I set my bag down on the bench, slow, deliberate. Aligned on what I asked. The agreement, he said. There's no reason to complicate things in there. Mom stepped closer. Amara, honey, we've talked about this. It's just a formality at this point. A formality, I repeated. Richard cleared his throat lightly. The court just needs confirmation that all parties understand and accept the terms. It's routine. Routine. I looked at the three of them, Daniel calm and measured, my mother anxious but hopeful, Richard neutral but positioned. They had already decided how this would go. They were just waiting for me to follow the script. I've reviewed everything I said. Daniel nodded. Good. And I understand what I'm being asked to sign. Then we're on the same page. Not exactly. That landed. Small shift. Subtle but real. Mom reached for my arm. Amara, I gently pulled back, not sharply, just enough to create space. I'm not trying to make this difficult, I said. I just need clarity on a few things before we go in. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his shoulders squared slightly. What kind of clarity, he asked. Process, I said. Timeline. How decisions were made. We've already gone over that, he replied. Not in detail. Richard stepped in, voice calm. If there are specific concerns, we can address them after the hearing. Right now, the focus is simply confirming the agreement. That's exactly why I'm asking now, I said. Another pause. This one tighter. Daniel exhaled slowly. Amara, there's no hidden issue here. Everything was done properly. Then answering questions shouldn't be a problem. It's not, he said. It's just unnecessary. For you, I said. Mom's voice dropped lower, more urgent. Please don't do this here. I turned to her. Do what? Make this bigger than it is. I held her gaze. It's already big, I said. You just decided not to call it that. She looked away first. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You're overthinking this, he said. There's no benefit to pushing back right now. No benefit for who? For anyone, he said. Including you. I studied his face. There it was again. Not fear, not exactly. But pressure. Controlled. Managed. Daniel, I said, quietly. If everything is as straightforward as you say, then there's nothing to worry about. There isn't. Good. I picked up my bag again. Then let's go inside. He didn't move right away. Neither did Richard. Mom looked between us, uncertain. Amara, she started. I shook my head slightly. Not dismissive. Just final. We can talk after, I said. That was the closest thing to reassurance I was willing to give. We walked into the courtroom together, but not as a unit. Just people entering the same space for very different reasons. The room was smaller than I expected. The judge was already seated reviewing a file. We took our places. Daniel and Richard at one table. Me at the other. Mom sat behind them, hands still clasped. The clerk called the case. Names, formalities, procedure. It all moved quickly. Then the judge looked up. Ms. Mendez, he said, directing his attention to me. I understand there is a family settlement agreement for your review and signature today. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Have you had the opportunity to review the document? I have. And do you understand its terms? I do. A pause. Are you prepared to sign? Every eye in the room shifted to me. Daniel didn't look at me directly. He was watching the judge. Richard had a pen ready. My mother held her breath. I looked down at the document in front of me. Same language, same structure, same quiet removal of everything that had been mine to question. Then I looked up. Your Honor. I said, my voice steady before I sign. I have one question. The judge leaned back slightly. What is your question? I didn't rush it. I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke clearly. Who scheduled the signing appointment for this agreement, I said, and under what medical clearance it was determined appropriate at that time. The room didn't react immediately, but something shifted, not visibly, internally. Daniel turned his head slightly. Richard's pen stopped moving. My mother's hands tightened in her lap. The judge's expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. He looked at Richard. Counsel, he said. And for the first time since this started, no one answered right away. Silence doesn't usually last long in a courtroom, but this one did. Not because no one could speak, because no one knew how to answer without choosing a side of the truth they hadn't expected to defend. Richard Cole cleared his throat first. Your Honor, he said. Adjusting his posture, the agreement was prepared in accordance with the family's wishes, and the judge raised a hand slightly. That's not what she asked. Another pause. Richard glanced at Daniel. Not long. Just enough. Then back at the judge. The scheduling of the signing, Richard said carefully, was coordinated through our office. By whom, the judge asked. By the family representative, Richard replied. The same phrase I had seen in the document. The judge's gaze shifted to Daniel. Mr. Mendez, he said, are you the family representative being referred to? Daniel straightened slightly. Yes, Your Honor. And did you schedule the signing appointment? Daniel hesitated. A fraction of a second. But it was visible. Yes, he said. The judge nodded once, then leaned forward slightly. And what steps were taken to ensure that Mr. Carlos Mendez had the capacity to understand the document at the time of signing? There it was. Not my question anymore. The court's question. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Richard stepped in again. Your Honor, Mr. Mendez was of sound mind and expressed clear intent regarding the structure of his estate. That's a general statement, the judge said. I'm asking about the specific day of signing. Richard paused, then said, we relied on the understanding that Mr. Mendez's condition allowed for informed decision-making. Relied on whose understanding, the judge asked. Another pause. Longer this time. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched. Because this was the moment Natalie had described. Not an argument. A contradiction being asked to explain itself. Daniel finally spoke. He knew what he was doing, he said. The judge looked at him directly. What is that based on? Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. I was there. That establishes presence, the judge said. Not capacity. A shift ran through the room. Small but real. Richard stepped forward again, voice more controlled now. Your Honor, if there are concerns regarding capacity, those can be addressed through appropriate channels. Today's matter is simply the acknowledgement of a family agreement. The judge didn't look at him. He was still watching Daniel. Mr. Mendez, he said, were any medical evaluations conducted on or near the date of signing to confirm Mr. Mendez's cognitive ability to execute this agreement? Daniel didn't answer right away, because there was no clean answer. No formal evaluation at that exact time, he said finally. And were you aware of his medical condition at the time? Yes. Can you describe that condition? Daniel exhaled slowly. He was in treatment, he said. He had good days and bad days. Was the signing scheduled on a good day, the judge asked. I believed so. Based on what? Another pause. This one longer than all the others. Richard shifted beside him. My mother looked down, her hands pressed together tightly now. I believed he understood, Daniel said. The judge leaned back. That is not the same as verifying. No one responded, because there wasn't anything left to say that wouldn't make things worse. The judge turned his attention to me. Ms. Mendez, he said, do you have information relevant to this question? I didn't rush. I reached into my bag, took out a single folder, and placed it on the table. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I opened it carefully. These are medical records from the week of the scheduled signing, I continued. They include a documented capacity assessment. Richard stepped forward slightly. Your Honor, we have not reviewed those documents. You will, the judge said calmly. In due course. He looked back at me. What do they indicate? I met his gaze. They indicate that Mr. Mendez had impaired executive function, I said, and was not advised to make complex financial decisions at that time. The room didn't react loudly, but the shift was undeniable now. Not tension. Wait. The judge nodded once, then turned back to Richard. Given this information, he said, I am not prepared to proceed with the acknowledgement of this agreement today. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. Your Honor, I am ordering a temporary suspension of this matter. The judge continued, his tone even. Pending further review of the circumstances surrounding the execution of this document. He glanced at Daniel. Specifically, he added the issue of capacity and the role of the family representative in scheduling and facilitating the signing. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there still, like the ground under him had shifted in a way he hadn't accounted for. The judge returned his attention to the file in front of him. This court is not making a final determination at this time, he said. But there are sufficient questions to warrant further examination. He looked up one last time. Ms. Mendez, you are not required to sign anything today. Yes, Your Honor, I said. He nodded. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down softly. Not dramatic, just final enough. People began to move. Chairs shifted. Papers gathered. But at our table, no one stood immediately. Daniel stared straight ahead. Richard leaned in toward him, speaking in a low voice I couldn't hear. My mother remained in her seat. Her hands still clasped, her eyes unfocused. I closed my folder, slowly, carefully, not because I needed time, but because I understood what had just happened. Nothing had been decided, and yet everything had changed. Not because I proved everything, but because I asked the one question that forced them to explain what they couldn't explain cleanly. I stood up. No one stopped me. No one said anything. And as I walked out of the courtroom, I realized something that felt quieter than victory, but more real. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had just refused to give something away. 3 weeks after the hearing, I stopped waiting for updates and started living my life again. That was the first real shift. Not the court's decision, not the paperwork, the distance. Natalie called me on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing a quarterly report. They've completed the preliminary review, she said. I leaned back in my chair. And the court isn't approving the agreement as it stands, she replied. There are too many unresolved concerns about capacity and process. I didn't feel surprised. Just steady. What happens next, I asked. They can try to revise it, she said. Or pursue a different structure. But anything moving forward will require transparency and proper oversight. And my role, you're back where you should have been from the beginning, she said. A legal beneficiary with full rights to review, question, and participate. Not control, not dominance. Just presence. Okay, I said. There's something else, Natalie added. I waited. They offered a revision. Of course they did. This version includes shared oversight, she continued. Periodic reporting, distribution guidelines. Your approval required for major decisions. I nodded slowly. They're trying to stabilize the situation. They're trying to move forward, she corrected gently, on terms that can hold up. Do I have to accept it? No, she said. You have options now. That was the difference. Before I had been presented with a decision, now I had a choice. I'll review it, I said. Take your time, Natalie replied. There's no pressure anymore. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment looking at the screen in front of me without really seeing it. No pressure. That was new. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Can we talk? I stared at it longer than I expected, not because I didn't know what she wanted, but because I was deciding what I wanted. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I made dinner. Something simple. Something that didn't require much thought. By the time I sat down to eat, the message was still there, unanswered. I picked up my phone again, then put it back down, because I wasn't avoiding her. I was choosing the terms of the conversation. That took me a few more days. When I finally called, her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Amara, hi, Mom. There was a pause. I wasn't sure you'd call back, she said. I needed time, I understand. Another pause. I'm sorry, she said. The words came out quickly like they had been waiting. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have asked more questions. I thought Daniel was doing the right thing. I listened. Not interrupting, not correcting. I didn't think it would turn into this, she continued. I didn't think you'd be pushed out. I wasn't pushed out, I said calmly. I was expected to step aside. She inhaled softly. That's not what I wanted, but it's what happened. Silence. I miss how things were, she said. I looked out the window. Chicago lights, distant traffic. My life separate from theirs. I said. Not harsh, just honest. Another pause. Longer this time. What does that mean? She asked. It means I'm not trying to go back, I said. I'm trying to move forward. With us, she asked. I thought about that. With boundaries, I said. She didn't respond immediately. Then I don't know what that looks like. I do, I said, and I did. It looks like transparency, I continued. No decisions made without everyone being informed. No assumptions about what I don't need. And no pressure to agree to something just because it's easier for someone else. She was quiet. I can try, she said. That's all I'm asking. We didn't resolve everything in that call. We didn't fix the past, but we changed the terms of the future. That was enough. A week later, I met with Natalie again to review the revised agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it was different, clearer, balanced. It acknowledged my role instead of removing it. It required accountability instead of assuming it. Legally sound, Natalie said, and enforceable. I closed the document. I'll sign this one, I said, not because I trusted the people behind it, but because I trusted the structure. That was the lesson. Not who to trust, but what to rely on. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I just went home, poured a glass of wine, and sat in the quiet. No pressure, no urgency, no expectation to give something away just to keep the peace. And for the first time since Carlos died, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not even relief. Just alignment with myself. Because in the end, I didn't win by taking control. I won by refusing to surrender it. Sometimes the hardest part of family conflict isn't the betrayal itself. It's recognizing it while it's still quiet. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just a series of small decisions made without you explained away as for your own good. If you've ever been in that position, you know how easy it is to question yourself, to wonder if you're overreacting, to feel like pushing back might cost you everything. But boundaries aren't punishment. They're clarity. They define what you're willing to participate in and what you're not. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight louder or prove more. It's to ask one clear, grounded question that brings everything into the open. Forgiveness, if it comes, doesn't mean returning to the same dynamic. It means releasing the need to be understood by people who chose not to understand you and still choosing yourself anyway. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. And if you've ever had to set a boundary with family, feel free to share your experience. Stories like this are fictional, created for entertainment, education, and reflection, but the emotions behind them are very real. If you want more stories about quiet strength, difficult choices, and finding your way back to yourself, you can subscribe and stay with me for the next one.